right. Thank you everyone for joining us for this afternoon's Skills Lab. My name is Zalia Kuchwaya, a Senior Technical Solutions Engineer with Blackbaud. This session is meant to be interactive. Your expert instructor will be taking you step by step as you learn a new skill, sharing their learnings along the way, and going deep into today's particular topic. And today we're focusing on a gift digest, so we are excited about that. Our presenter is our very own Heather McLean. Before we dive into today's skills lab, I want to remind you that today's topic, or our session rather, will have you muted, but you will be able to participate in chat. And I understand that some people may not have seen our initial post, so I will repost those instructions for you to be able to engage through our chat session. We've also established prerequisites for today. And those prerequisites will be reposted as well. The main thing here is that you should have 2 monitors, allowing you to follow along as Heather walks us through this process. In addition to that, within the post, there are links allowing you to create your web developer account if that has not already taken place. And Heather, let me know if you're able to see that repost.
Not yet.
Okay, let me try it from another location. While I'm reposting this information, I'll have Heather kick things off. Many of you already know her, so it's a welcome. And to others who've not had the pleasure of participating in accelerator classes, Heather McLean is the individual that has led this program since its inception last spring or summer, I want to say. And we've had multiple cohort participants, some of which have been presenters in today's multiple sessions. Heather?
Yeah, hi everybody. I love the Skills Labs the best because we have a smaller group and we can just have a conversation with each other and ask as many questions as we want, and I'll do my best to answer them. So in this session, you can absolutely post in the chat, but you'll notice we got a little bit of background noise there. You're also able to take yourself off mute and just ask questions throughout. So let's just keep this a conversation. I have, been an evangelist for the Microsoft Power Platform for a really long time. I saw the potential of it early to really help our customers be able to create their own future and sort of what they wanted to have with their applications. Razor's Edge, we didn't customize Razor's Edge. When I went down to Charleston and fought off the alligators long before I joined Blackbaud and got my certification, it's a templated solution, right? You can configure certain business processes, but we never customized. And now it's a whole new day of being able to create the solution that your end users need, extend beyond the solution, and connect to new different technologies and services. But I have to say that I sat on the sidelines for a long time. I was sort of the teacher that didn't do. I was the business analyst that liked to map all the business logic. I understood the data that was required. I understood how the Power Platform worked, but I am the least techie of the solution architects and was scared to make the leap into actually building out my own workflows. And I know that we have my former partner in crime who helped me launch the accelerator program here, who's since left Blackbaud, but is still a huge fan and evangelist for this program, Trevor Kelly. And as much as I was sad to lose Trevor when he left Blackbaud, it forced me to put my hands on the wheel and to dive in and to start creating my own workflows. And I have to say that it was painful at first. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't. And it was only through working through my own business problem I was trying to solve that I got the agility and the dexterity and to start really harnessing the power of this. So I'll ask first and foremost, you guys have your hands up, like your little hand icon up at the top. How many of the folks in this room, by show of hands, have never touched Power Automate before? This is going to be your very, very first exposure to Power Automate. Don't be shy. This is the beginner course. So if that's you, that you're in the right place. Okay. Go ahead and yep, you're in the right place. Don't worry. And you can lower your hands. How many of you have already started creating a flow or maybe multiple flows? Hands raised. Oh, we got a few of those too. So you gotta help the people coming up behind you. So thank you for that. Does anybody want to come off mute and share a little bit about what they have built already with Power Automate? Any takers? Stephanie, you want to share? Or did you not get your hand down fast enough?
I can share something.
Sure.
Hi, folks. My name is Tori. I'm from the Maryland Food Bank. I saw flows at BBCon, I guess, last year and was super excited and had no experience at that time. So I have made a couple of flows not using Razor's Edge data because that was scary. But something that I've made that was really useful was I get a whole bunch of email attachments from my direct mail vendor. And I created a flow to sort my email attachments into folders so I can find my data requests versus our weekly agendas without having to dig through my email. So nothing like super groundbreaking, but it's a small efficiency for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tori, for sharing. It's a good reminder. I've started to teach the robot to do a lot of, I like to say teach the robot when we're talking about Power Automate, because you really do have to teach the robot every single step, like it doesn't know anything. Teach the robot how to automate some of the rote tasks that I do in the day that don't have anything to do with Razor's Edge NXT. So thank you, Tori, for sharing. Anybody else want to share something they've worked on? All right, we're gonna get you guys talking by the end of this skills lab, that's for sure. All right, well today we're gonna cover some of the key topics around just getting started with the Power Platform before we dive in to actually hands-on and working with a flow. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And Zalia and Trevor, I would love for both of you, feel free to take yourself off mute and help me out as we go through the presentation. So this is something that I like to start with because a lot of times where our students get stuck is just in the ideation phase. Sort of how do I identify a good automation project? And believe it or not, because a lot of you are Power DBAs that probably spend a lot of your time in database view. Can I get hands raised on database view predominant users here? Yep. Because we work in the database view all the time, we sort of assume, oh, NXT can't do that. And so the first thing you just got to be wary of is making sure that you're up to speed on all of the web view functionality. For example, when we first started teaching the accelerator course, one of the main workflows that we tackled was actually a receipting process. So how to send a acknowledgement or receipt in an automated way from the constituent record when it's been lost or the donor calls into donor service to receive it. Well, about halfway through, I think it was maybe our third cohort, Trevor, we had to completely change the curriculum because guess what? Receipting and re-receipting and giving statements came to the web view. So, we always ask students when they're coming forward with projects, what about the web view functionality doesn't work for you or your end users, right? So making sure that you're staying up to date on what's available in the web view. You also need to sort of think about your automation into what's a process that you can apply a standard set of business rules or logic to it. Because oftentimes we want to try to automate things that maybe have a lot of too much complexity in it, too many conditions, too many if-thens. You can do all of that on Power Automate, but it's really not a great place to get started. You want to, as Zalia shared in the lightning round today, you really do want to try to start very, very simple and then add in complexity into your flows. Also, just thinking about where you can reduce human error, particularly a lot of workflows around data health projects, places where a particular user of Razor's Edge NXT wants to perhaps request an update to address fields or update you to merge records and things like that, where they're not able to do it on their own because they don't have the admin rights, and you sort of want that checks and balances in there. That can be another good opportunity for automation. We won't go in this today, but there's other skills labs going on concurrently that you'll want to make sure you check out on the Sky Developer YouTube channel that talk about approvals. So approvals is another great application of Power Automate because it has a built-in with Microsoft approvals that you can get in Teams, you can get on your smartphone through push notifications. So getting notified when you need to approve things. And then, also just thinking about connecting data between systems. So Microsoft Power Automate is not a good solution for a full bore integration between different applications. So if you're needing to move sort of large segments of your data between different systems, not necessarily a good use of Power Automate. But if you want to connect to systems and have a minimal number of data points that you want to keep in sync across those systems, or when something happens in Razor's Edge NXT, you want something to happen in another system, that is a good application of Power Automate. So there's a link here on the screen. I'll make sure to post this in the chat. There's some documentation that's available from Microsoft specifically around the getting started steps. And we also have some ideation tools that are available on Sky Developer that we'll go through in a few moments. Okay, so for those of you that don't know anything about the Power Platform, and that's totally fine, there's different components of the Microsoft Power Platform. So in another virtual room, there's a getting started on Power BI, which involves a different connector than what we're going to be talking about today. There's Power Apps. So this is the opportunity to create applications that can live external to your application being Razor's Edge NXT, or even through Sky Add-ins, another skills lab going on around embedding Power Apps into Razor's Edge NXT. And then what we're going to be focused on today, which is Power Automate, which is really the workflow automation engine. But something cool that we're really working on and thinking about applications of are Power Virtual Agents. So these are chatbots that are available to you. And we have a couple of prototypes that are available around donor service requests and resending receipts and other use cases. But we're going to focus on Power Automate today. So first things first, how many of you, by show of hands, have your Sky developer account?
I think so.
You think so? Okay. All right. I see most of you do. If you're not sure, scroll up. There is a link in the chat that Zalia posted about how you get your Sky developer account. That's the first ingredient that you need to be able to get involved with the official Razor's Edge NXT connector for Microsoft Power Platform. So once you do that, we have our own area. If you go to developer.blackbaud.com, you'll find under documentation a particular area for Microsoft Power Platform. And we've been spending a lot of time. If you came to the last lightning round, you heard from Lindsay Ricks. She's our angel behind the scenes, who has been taking all of the feedback from our accelerator students and other end users, where you're getting stuck and what types of information would be helpful to you in getting started using Power Automate. So we have recently made quite a number of updates, and she touched on them briefly, but I want to go through them in a little bit more detail. I promise you we will get to the large gift digest notification in just a few moments. So on the getting started page, there's some documentation around sort of automation and ideation. So there's sort of an art of the possible video that you can watch that shows some of the ways that different social good developers are using Power Automate. As well as a link to a ideation workbook. And this ideation workbook has really become a tool for a lot of our Power Platform developers to capture needs and requirements from end users, to keep a backlog of automation ideas and projects that you want to work through. So encourage you to check out that resource. Zalia and I and other experts here at Blackbaud, we hold office hours on the third Wednesday of every month. So you can sign up for a time by clicking on this link. And if you're working on a flow and not getting the answers you need within Blackbaud community from likely Dan Snyder or Austin Brown or Trevor Kelly or one of our prolific community members, and you just need a little more coaching and guidance, you can sign up for this timing. It's also going to have some information around licensing, and Microsoft licensing is one of the most confusing things. If you think Blackbaud's confusing, Microsoft is very confusing. So even though there's some nonprofit information here around licensing, I'd highly recommend that everybody talk to your IT administrator. Most nonprofits have licenses to the Power Platform already. You need a premium license to work with the Razor's Edge NXT connector. You likely have it, it just may not be provisioned to you. So you'll likely need to go to your IT administrator and ask for it to be provisioned. There are also free trials available that are listed on the site. I believe they're, for an extended period, 60 or 90 days. But that's not going to suffice if you want to continue working on the Power Platform. There's also, as I mentioned, a lot of different training videos that we have up on the site. So the Accelerator 101 course, so this is the Getting Started course, where we will go in detail around, in fact, this large gift digest notification. So if today is not enough and you want to go deeper, you'll find it within this several week course. So that's just a little bit of the getting started documentation. Once you've sort of gone through that, it does then walk you through, and Zalia posted this in the chat, the initial setup. So this is how you go through connecting your Razor's Edge NXT instance to the Microsoft Power Platform. So again, you're going to see you're going to have to be an environment admin in order to make these connections. So again, you might have to ask someone in your organization who does have that admin role to make the initial connection. But this page will walk you through sort of these steps as well as some of the troubleshooting that is available to you. Has everyone here gone through these initial steps? Hands raised if you've already connected. Okay, good. Most of you have. It's pretty simple to do from the app marketplace, so you'll want to make sure that you go through that initial setup. Next, so some things to help you get started. This came directly from our accelerator students and where they were getting stuck. So under basics, you're going to find a lot of helpful information just around sort of the key concepts, the types of flows you can create, how you build connections within Power Automate, how we import flows, common error handling tips, how you test flows. So each of these, as you go in, like for example, to the different types of flows, it's giving you some key information around those types of flows and importing flows. So this you absolutely want to know how to do because importing flows is your best way to plagiarize other people's work, which is really what this is all about. So you'll notice that a lot of our Power Platform developers that participated in the skills labs were talking about sharing their code. So if you click down to the template showcase, this is where you can get access to those different flows that previous developers have already created. So you'll notice that there's one here for an actions list digest notification. There's several in here from Trevor, and there's many from other developers as well. So if you are creating something amazing, small or big, please contribute. There's instructions here for how you would contribute a template to the community. But you can see here that we've got a daily gift digest notification as one of the templates that's here for you to grab. So if I go and say, go to that sample flow, guess who we're going to meet? If it comes up, it didn't log me out. I think I still have it up. Yep. You're going to see Trevor Kelly. Hi, Trevor. This is Trevor's post in the community. And right here, this zip file is really all you need to take and install and work from your own gift digest notification. So this was also posted in the chat here in Microsoft Teams. So where it said, keep this code handy. This is the code for the finished product that we're going to be sort of walking through today in order to demonstrate some of the key concepts with Power Automate. All right, let me pause there. I know I asked you guys to raise hands throughout. I just want to make sure that none of these hands raised are a question.
Heather, one thing I'll mention real quick, because there's another gift notification flow that you'll see in that list of templates, and part of the reason why we decided that this one, the gift digest notification, would be more beneficial to our customers was the fact that, at the end of the day, you can just get a simplified list of all the gifts that came in that meet that threshold versus getting one-off notifications, especially if you're entering in gifts through batch, because it wouldn't make sense for you to get 30 notifications all at once, 30 separate email notifications at once, if they're all being entered at the same time. So there are options. And again, the idea is that you can take these and really make them your own. So depending on what you want to do, choose the one that makes the most sense. And if it's not gifts, maybe it's for event registrants, or maybe it's for opportunities or actions. I know Zaya posted one earlier, either today or yesterday, on actions. So there's a lot of really cool use cases that you can just kind of take these and then run with it.
And I think if there's another one, similar concept from Austin Brown, a digest of upcoming opportunities with close dates. So again, the same sort of concept of a notification. And in fact, you can, we just added this so that you can sort these, and we hope to grow this. So you can sort of look by the difficulty level, the category, so automation, integration, notification, data management. And as we grow this to encompass all of our solutions, being able to toggle by those solutions here as well. And if it's a Power App, a Power Automate flow, or it involves a custom connector, like the example with Financial Edge and some other custom connectors that have been built. So this is a really good place to start to say, is there something that someone has already created that I can work off of, even if it's just a guide, right? So even if it's just digging in and saying, okay, how did they solve for this? And then replicating it in your own flow. All right. Is the Sky Developer account the same one that you set up for Power BI? So Sky Developer, your Sky Developer account is connected to your Blackbaud ID and is unique to Blackbaud. So it doesn't have anything per se to do with the Microsoft Power Platform. What it does is allow you to take advantage of the Sky Developer tools and to work with the APIs. But overall, the way that you connect to Power BI and the way that you connect to Power Automate are different. So Blackbaud has a certified connector for Power Automate, meaning you can find it easily in the Power Platform ecosystem alongside all of the other applications that are in there. Whereas for Power BI, there's a custom connector for Power BI that's available through GitHub that you have to install. So Power BI and the whole methodology around Power BI is very different than it is for Power Automate. So Power Automate is a really good place to start for new low coders. Okay. So before we get started, I promise you we will get into the flows. I want to just orient you to a few more key concepts. So in Razor's Edge NXT, there are a lot of different ID types. And so we're most familiar with working with what we call the constituent ID, right? That's sort of your public facing ID that you use in a lot of reports and such. But that is not the main ID that we actually work with within Power Automate, which can be confusing to first-time users. We're actually working with this ID that you can find up here in the structure, this 6198, which is the system record ID for this constituent, which you can also see if you go under constituent properties in the constituent summary tile. The system record ID is 6198. So, and this constituent ID that we call constituent ID is actually the lookup ID. So people can often get confused and saying, why are my flows finding the wrong constituent? Why is my flow finding the wrong gift? And it's because you're working with this ID instead of this ID. So just be attuned to that, and it can be a little bit confusing as we dive into the flow. The other thing to just think about or remember is that we want to try to leverage sort of the native tools that are available to us in NXT to limit the data that we actually want to work with within a flow. And so you can, from within Power Automate, access your NXT lists. So any lists that are created, and these are web view lists, you can access within Power Automate. So you'll see here that I am, for the purposes of this flow, going to work with a gift list that I've named Skills Lab gift list. And there's 2 high rollers on my list that have given gifts over $1,000 today. So this list is filtered to a gift greater than or equal to $1,000 who have given a gift today. So a lot of the flows that you have and you want to build, especially ones around digests and notifications, are going to build off of either a constituent list, a gift list, an opportunity list, or an action list as the starting point for the data set you'll be working with in Power Automate. So we'll get back to this gift list in just a moment. This is the link for the documentation around our connector. So I'm going to post this in the chat. So this is the documentation around the connector itself. And so what you can see here as you scroll down is all of the actions that you can use within a Power Automate workflow. And if you click into any of them, you can receive more information about the data that's returned with that particular action. So for those of you that were in the Hot Topics Skills Lab, you heard that Ben Lambert made some announcements around what's happening with the connectors. So right now there's only one Razor's Edge NXT connector. It's a monolithic connector that has everything in it. We have outgrown the Microsoft ecosystem by the size of our connector, which is a very good thing. So sometime in the next 2 to 4 weeks, you're actually going to see that there are a number of Razor's Edge NXT connectors that are loosely tied to what we used to call modules in old school RE7 days and database view. So a Blackbaud Razor's Edge NXT connector for constituents, another one for gifts, for events, and things like that. Don't let that change stop you from getting started. We're not going to, while we're not going to be adding anything new into this connector, we're still going to be supporting this connector. So feel free to work with it. And as soon as the new refactored, new and improved connector releases, they're going to release with a ton of new actions that have been ready but held up in the queue until that refactoring exercise was complete. So this is always a good reference that you want to bookmark so that you can say, like, is that even possible to do within Power Automate? Okay. Next. So you'll probably will have noticed that a lot of folks that were presenting today and we're talking about Power Automate started out with a flow chart. And I highly, highly, highly recommend this as a best practice, because without this as a guide, especially for a brand new user, you're tempted to just want to get in and start to build things. And you can quickly get confused because of all of the loops and conditions that you've had to put into your flow. So it's good whether you want to use this method, which is, using Visio to create a flow chart, or you want to rely on PowerPoint, or Austin Brown likes to create massive documents where she uses nested indentation to show different areas in her flow. However your mind works, take it to paper first, because one, it's going to help you stay grounded into what you're trying to do and not get lost when you're going into the build. It's going to allow you to identify where there might be opportunities to sort of streamline your flow. And overall, it's going to make it a lot easier for you. So we definitely recommend that as a best practice. So what we're going to do today, let me pause and see if there are any questions before we get into the meat of the digest and talking about some of those concepts. Robin, did you have a question? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay. So what we're going to do in this flow is at every night at 11 p.m., presumably after all of our gifts have come in for the day, we're going to initiate this process. So this is going to be the trigger for our flow. It's going to be a scheduled flow that runs every night at 11 p.m. and generates our digest for the day. You can have it set at any schedule of your choosing, but we're going to work with 11 p.m. at night. So we're going to create the variables that are going to start to store the information for the content that we ultimately want to pull into our digest. So we're going to have to initialize variables, and I'll show you that in a few moments. Then we're going to retrieve that list. So that list that we've created in Razor's Edge NXT that has the gifts that are filtered to those that are greater than or equal to $1,000 that came in today. So we're going to retrieve that list in Power Automate. And first we're going to check to say, are there any gifts today? Maybe there's 0, or maybe there's more than 0. So if there are no gifts that came in today, we're just going to end the process because there's nothing to report. But if there are gifts that qualify, we're then going to loop. So that's another key concept in Power Automate. We're going to loop through each of the gifts that are in the list and retrieve some information about that gift that we want to deliver to the recipient of our notification. And then we're going to bring all of that, make it pretty, and deliver that email notification that has the digest of the gifts that came in today. So this is where I mean start simple. So first, when you get going, just see, can I pull in the gift information? Then it's sort of, can I make this pretty? Can I make this something that someone wants to consume? Okay, now I want to get fancy. So maybe I need to consider split gifts, or I want to put fundraiser assignments, or I want to build in if there is an upcoming action with the constituent that made the gift and I want to display it. So all of this adds in more complexity into your flow. So it's better to sort of start with the bare bones and then add more in. And when you're adding more in, it's better to just keep copying your flow over so that you retain sort of the clean, pristine version of the flow. And then you can experiment in subsequent flows, because you can create as many old flows as you want. Okay, so we're going to start really, really simple. So the first thing after, we're now going to go into flow. So this is flow.microsoft.com. So that's where you're going to start. And you can see here that you can either go to your flows. So over here on the left is sort of where all of your navigation is. And I don't find the symbols all that intuitive. So I have to hover over it. But good news, we had some meetings with Microsoft recently to give them feedback on their navigation, and they're hopefully going to be making some improvements. So the key ones here is, here's my flows. So I can go over to flows that are in here or flows that have been shared with me. But here's where you visit the button to import. So if you want to follow along and you want to get that zip file that we posted up, this is the process that you would need to go through. So all you do is just click on upload, and it's going to want that file as a zip package. So when you import that flow, that's the format that you need. You don't need to extract the data from the files. Oh, thank you for that tip. I just saw a tip in the chat. I always like those tips. So you don't have to do it now if you want to follow along and go through. It's going to prompt you, and Trevor's giving you some handy information about what you need to reconfigure. So for example, it says after importing the flow, you got to authorize the connections, right? There's a couple of connections. So you're going to have to authorize to connect to Razor's Edge NXT, and you're going to need to let it know what Outlook 365 user the notification is going to be sent from. So you'll notice that when you go in to import your flow. So after you've imported the flow, if you want to work from it, or if you want to just get started, you're going to go to create. And from create, this is where you'll see a lot of helpful information. Don't ignore these templates down here at the bottom. These are really handy templates that mostly focus on Microsoft 365 integrations and productivity tools like Teams and Outlook and PowerPoint and SharePoint and OneNote, but they can be helpful to incorporate into the flow. But mostly you're going to be working with these different types of canvases up here at the top for working with Power Automate flows. The main ones that you'll likely be using are a scheduled flow, which we're going to use for this gift digest, or an automated cloud flow. We're not going to be working with automated cloud flows, but you may have noticed Zalia's presentation today in the lightning round. She had different flows that were triggered by completion of a Microsoft form. So the completion of the Microsoft form was the event that triggered her flows. But for here, we're going to focus on the scheduled flow. So I have fully cheated and brought Trevors Wonder in through an import process. And then we'll just sort of go through these pieces and sort of talk about some of the key concepts. And Trevor, you feel free to chime in any old time you choose. Because what I will say is that the way that Trevor first built this flow in Accelerator Class 1 and the way he built the flow by Accelerator Class 3 changed, because he learned some things along the way that streamlined the flow. So you're going to get the benefit of all of that. But just know there's a lot of sort of fancy stuff in here that he's gifting to you. But what weren't things that you knew, Trevor, right? When you started making the flows around the arrays and the HTML tables and all of those things.
Yeah, and one thing just looking at this right now that I would change right away is initialize variable. So you can actually rename all these actions that you're saying. If you were to create a flow from scratch, you're at the mercy of Microsoft's naming conventions when you add various actions. So for example, initialize variable, that means nothing to an end user, and you want to make sure that you can, like Heather just did, go ahead and click on those three dots, the menu options, and rename it so that this is readable when you first pull it up and you know exactly what's happening through each step of the flow. Even some of the some of the Blackbaud actions, like get a constituent, you might be getting 4 or 5 different constituents in your flow, especially if you're getting like the names of the donor, the name of the fundraiser, the name of any relationships. So you want to make sure that when you say get a constituent, you rename it so that it's very, very clear exactly what that action is doing. Which constituent are we getting?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just saw that and I had to make a comment about it because I was like, oh, I wish I renamed it before I uploaded it into the community.
It's okay. You can always go back and change it, but it is a best practice. And when you get really complex flows, to Trevor's point, you don't know what get constituent 1 is, get constituent 2 is, get constituent 3 is. So that's where it's really helpful to refer back to your flow chart, because each of these sort of steps here are generally an action that sort of matches the high level view of your flow here. So you can see here that the type of, this was a scheduled flow. So we have this running at an interval of 1 day. So you have control over the frequency. And if I expand sort of these options here, you know, you can choose things like time zone, or, you know, at a particular hour or minute of the day. So you can get pretty specific around when you want this to run. Now, variables. This is sort of it was a difficult concept for me to really get, but essentially what it is when you're initializing a variable, you are teaching the robot in Power Automate to reserve a place to put information later, right? So it's almost like, imagine an inbox on somebody's desk, right? And now we're going to add things into the inbox. So initializing a variable and thinking through sort of what are the elements that I'm going to need to create and add data to or increment in my flow. So what we always teach in the class, it's really great to sort of think about what those are at the front and to set them up at the beginning of the flow. So in this case, we're going to be working with the email content, and the type of variable we're going to be creating is an array. So there's several different types of variables. Most often you're working with an array, which is sort of a list of information that you want to work with, but there could be cases where you have, you know, an integer, so a whole number that you want to increment and increase. So I want to count as something is added, or a string. So there are lots of string variables, which is just a non-formatted text of information that you're working with. So in this case, we're going to initialize in a variable to create an array, which is going to be where we start populating information for our digest. Then this is where we're going to choose our list that we wanted to create. So you can see here, this is actually pulling, this action here is pulling all of the lists that I have available in this Razor's Edge NXT instance. And there's the one that I had created earlier called Skills Lab Lists. So Trevor's renamed this pull recent gift list from Razor's Edge NXT. But if I wanted to do this from scratch and add an action, I would be searching for Blackbaud. And you can see I have a number of different databases. You're likely only going to have one. So you're going to choose Blackbaud, Razor's Edge NXT, and then here's a list of all of those connections that you saw here. So all of those different actions that you can use within your flow. And in this case, I want to work with a list. So I'm going to search and using the search field as your best friend to get the different list actions that are available in the connector. And ultimately, I am going to want to get the list. So I'm going to list gifts. So that's how you add Razor's Edge NXT actions into your flow. But Trevor's already done the heavy lifting for us. All I have to do is point the robot to the gift list that I've already created that has my high value gifts in it. Now, going back to the flow chart, before we do anything, because we got to teach the robot every single little step, is we need to look at the list and say, was there actually anything in it today? Because it's a dynamic list, right? That's rebuilding every day as you are entering gifts. So this is a condition. So a condition is essentially where you are doing an if-then statement, or so if this happens, then I want this to happen. But if this happens, then I want that to happen. And you can have a couple of different types of conditions. So when you want to add a condition, they usually comes up right first. It's in the control. So you can see here adding a condition. There's within the condition now, see it's populating just like down here. What happens if it's a yes, and what happens if it's a no, right? You can also have sort of parallel sets if you want multiple things to happen, if there's multiple paths. But most often when you're getting started, you are just going to be working with a regular old condition where you are looking at a value and then determining if it's greater than or are equal to. And in this case, I want to look at the count. I want to look at the count to say the number of items available for retrieval, right? Okay, I think if someone said do the condition again, so I will. So I'm going to add an action. I'm going to just do it again. I'm making a messy flow here, like I told you not to do. But
Heather, actually, before you do that, there was a request for clarification on why you have two variables. So if you could just go back and show them they were renamed for separate purposes. Yeah.
Do you want to explain this one, Trevor, with the string? Because I was trying to gloss over it because I didn't want to confuse people, but.
Yeah, so the reason why, and what I like to do too is I like to put the variables up at the very top, because by putting the email to notify variable up at the very top, I don't have to search through the entire flow to find where are we actually sending out the email, because this is one of those ones where I knew I was going to be sharing it out. Everyone who's going to be using this flow is probably going to have a different email address that they're going to be sending the notification to. So by including a variable at the very top to say, who is this notification going to, I don't have to search the entire flow for that. I think I used an Outlook connector later on that Heather's going to go to. The second one is one that we had to set up because what we're doing is we're going to be building a digest bit by bit. And Heather's going to get into this a little bit more, but we have to basically create a holding area for the digest to live, so that as we accumulate each and every gift that's in the list and put in whatever the outputs are, like the donor's information, the gift amount, the funds, we need a place to put that. So the variable that we set up here called email content, it's empty right now, but when we get into the actual loop, we're going to be populating that variable with gift information as we start going through that loop or going through that list. So that's why we have it set up at the very beginning, so that once we get to that stage, we have that holding area to put that information in. Does that make sense? Does that help?
I think Rebecca, if you want to come off mute to let us know. Said, yeah, the answer was yes.
Okay. See, it's good to have more than one person teaching these skills labs because it takes sometimes a different person explaining it because all our brains work a little bit differently. And I know that variables confounded me at the beginning. But essentially, I'm creating a place to put something later. That's what clicked for me. So going back to
What a day I'm having. Yes.
So let's see. Hey, Barbara, do you have a question?
I think it was just a different conversation. So so this is where you're going to add a control. So it's one of the most common ones, so it comes up a lot, but if you go to control, you're going to see the different types of control actions that you can use. And in this case, we're choosing a condition. So a condition is a yes or no. So if the condition is met, do this. If the condition is not met, do this. There's also switches, which is if there's more than two different conditions. So if the count is 0, do this. If the count is 1, do this. If the count is more than 1, do this. That's it. We typically use a switch condition when we're searching for a constituent without wanting to create a duplicate constituent, for example, because it could return that there's no constituents in your database, one that matches that constituent, or more than one that matches that constituent. And you would need to teach the robot how to handle each of those situations. So in this one, we're going to use a condition, which is just a yes or a no branch. So I've pulled my gift list from NXT, and now I'm building out my conditions. So you'll notice, I had started to build it out, but what we're going to do here, let me just delete this one because I'm making a mess, like I said not to do. Oop, nope. I want to make sure I don't lose it. Go up there. Okay. I think it's okay. Okay. So now this is checking to see if there are any gifts in the list. So what I want to do, and you'll see here that this is opened up to another screen. There's dynamic content and expressions. And this is another good reason why you want to rename your actions, because it will then appear here in the list so that you can make sure that you're pulling in the data from the right element in the flow. So what I want to do is look at the count. So the number of items available in that list. And I want to build a condition that says, is it greater than 0, right? So are there more than one gift in my gift list? And in this case, if there's no gifts, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to send anything to anybody. You could think about populating this side of the branch with a different notification that says no gifts came in today, for example, if you wanted to. But in this case, we haven't done that. So now going back to the flow chart, we've now pulled the list and we've checked, are there any gifts that qualify? No, we're going to end the process. Now, yes. Yes is where we're going to encounter something called a loop. And Power Automate will often just go ahead and create the loops for you if there's more than one data element to evaluate in that particular action. So Trevors renamed this. So for each gift in the list that qualifies, you're going to get information about that constituent and get information about the donor, about the constituent. So I see a couple of questions flooding into the chat. Okay, if you don't use Microsoft 365, There's also just a regular old mail client, and then Google also has a connector to the Microsoft Power Platform. So Liz, what email server do you guys use internally? Gmail. So there's a Gmail connector available in the Microsoft ecosystem, so you can use that instead. Liz, I'll take that offline with you, because what you'll need to do is actually maybe go in and manage your connections first and set up and make sure you have that Gmail connection. It might just take a little bit more configuration. So Liz, email me at bbdevdays@blackbaud.com and just put "from Heather's Skills Lab" in the subject line, and I'll send you some more information on that. All right. So again, this is where the magic happens. So we're for each gift that qualifies. So we are selecting an output from the previous step, and then which is what's listed in the list. And then we're going to go ahead and get more detailed info. So this is a really common step in a Power Automate workflow. So right now, we want to get all of the information that we can about the gift that's in the list. So this is an action that we've added. So if I add an action and go to Blackbaud, and I go to this, and I type in gift, you'll see all of the gift actions, and this is get a gift. So it is taking the ID of the gift and going to get us all of the information available via API for that gift. I also want information about the donor. So remember we talked about those IDs? So in this case, it's actually getting a constituent, getting all the donor information, all the constituent information from that constituent ID. So you want to make sure that, and remember the constituent ID is the system record ID of the constituent. So remember we talked about those different types of IDs. So you're often going to want to, just like we initialize all of these variables up at the top to start to store data, another tip or technique that we recommend is thinking about what is all of the information that you would want to populate in your gift digest, and making sure that you're retrieving all of that information to use later on in the flow. Yes, it's very confusing. System record ID is called constituent ID in Power Automate. And the constituent ID that you call constituent ID is lookup ID in Power Automate. So yes, it's very confusing. Trevor, anything you want to add in these steps here?
Yeah, I would say it's not always called the constituent ID. Sometimes it's just called, sometimes just called ID. So you're going to want to look, depending on where you're calling it from. In this case, Heather was calling it from a gift. So that's where the ID lives. If it was just ID, it would be referring to the gift ID. So I like to notice that there's like little descriptions underneath each of those fields. Look at those carefully. So notice where it says ID, it says the system record ID of the gift. And then you look at constituent ID, it says the system record ID of the constituent. So just be cognizant of what you're actually pulling, and pay close attention to those descriptions, because it's going to vary depending on which record you're actually pulling the data from.
Now, this is where we start to make our digest look a bit prettier, because what the robot is going to read back to us is not that the gift amount is formatted for a currency. It's just going to give us the numbers 1600. So we want it to actually look formatted like a currency. So in this step, what Trevor's done is taken the amount value of the gift and told the robot, we want to actually format that to look like a currency. So you can see there's all of these different ways that you can format it. So it's taking the amount of the gift and making it look like a currency. And then here, this is where we're now going to start to apply that information to the variable called email content. So this is when you add an action called append to array. So we're taking, if we go all the way up to the top, we created that variable to store our message content. Now we are appending to that the information that we want to go into the digest. And there's some secret sauce in here that you'll want to copy to use in other flows. So and you have to know just a little tiny bit of HTML. So what's super nice is that wouldn't you want the person receiving the notification to have a hot link to be able to just click on it to go in and view the gift record or go in or view the constituent record? Yes, right? We want to get people working back within the system. So this information in this box is something called JSON. So you'll get familiar with JSON as you start working with Power Automate. But essentially you can copy it at first, and then you'll start to learn what all of this means. So it's basically taking everything within the squiggly brackets, right? The curly braces, and it's putting that information that is then going to be the columns in the gift digest. So here it's telling us the first column is going to be the name, and this is the HTML. It's basically saying I want to link, I want to create this link to go to the name of the constituent, right? So to that constituent's record. So everything inside the little carets is the HTML. And you remember when we were up here looking at the ID, you see this link here? This is a permanent link, right, to your record. So you can recreate this through dynamic content. So that 6198 right there, you see how we're dropping that dynamic content that is constituent ID into the HTML? That means it's going to concatenate it and actually create a link that would then direct, hyperlink the name of the constituent back to the constituent record. Then inside of our array, we want to show the constituent ID. So the next column in the table will be constituent ID. And you see, because our end users aren't working with system record IDs, they're working with the lookup ID. And then again, Trevor's gotten fancy, so he has hyperlinked the gift amount. So again, the same type of formatting for a URL for a gift record as a constituent record, except for it says gifts, and have taken the ID, the system record ID of the gift, to populate dynamically to create that link, and hyperlink that formatted number. So the number that we created here. So that's essentially going through every single one of the gifts that is qualifies. So there's been more than one GIF, looping through each of those GIFs and appending to the array the content that we want in our digest. So all of this down here is just for you to copy for the purposes of this presentation. Trevor has done the hard work for you of essentially making your digest look even prettier. So he has done a lot of styling to the end product, so you don't have to recreate it. And we're not going to go through these steps here unless, Trevor, you want to say anything more about it. I feel like if I open one of these, I might blow someone's mind because you've done some really interesting. thing.
All that those steps are doing is it's just formatting some HTML code. There's no magic button that makes it look pretty. So all those are really doing is it's replacing some weird HTML characters and adding some table formatting. You could just as easily create this flow without them, but your table is going to be very text-based. It's not going to, some of the values like the donor's name and the amount might merge together. There's no spacing in between. So that's all we're doing there is just making it look a little nicer.
All right. So now this is the crucial step. So all of this was in service of creating the notification. So in this case, we've created the notification to be done via Outlook. So you can type into Outlook and you can see your outlook.com and the different types of actions around sending an email, right? So all we're simply doing is sending an email. There's also just a regular old mail client, so that you can use, or you can see here there's Gmail or some other providers here that you can use to send your flow. So if I'm going to send an email, again, Trevor made it easy so we didn't have to remember to go all the way down here. We created this variable all the way up at the top that said, these are the people that are going to receive the notification. So I'll go ahead and
while you're doing that, I see some comments, and there was a question earlier about connecting to this flow if you don't have Microsoft or Office 365, if you're not using Outlook. I just uploaded a generic one of these that does not use Outlook. So if you are having trouble importing the one that Heather's using, you can, I just posted the link in the chat. You can use that one and try importing that one instead, and let me know if you have any issues with it.
Yeah, I know this is a lot. What I'm trying to do is sort of take you through all of the key steps, but I highly recommend after this, listening to this back or listening to Trevor's 101 course that walks you through how to do this and having your second screen open and really trying to do it as we go through each of the steps. So here you can see we're going to send this to me because I just put my value in that variable, and it said the subject line is look at, and again we pulled that count of how many gifts are in the list that are over $1,000. Just like in Zalia's best practice examples, we've actually just gone ahead and linked people to that full list, but then we've actually just inserted the output of the variable that will allow you to display everything for your gift digest. So basically all of this right here was creating an output that contains all of the information that you have collected and formatted and appended to that array, right? So ultimately, it's going to be populated here in the output. So you'll want to remember, because it doesn't work like autosave, that as you're going through, you actually need to save your flows, right? It's not auto-saving for you all the time. So you got to be mindful. You got to be mindful to save your flows as you're going through. One of the first steps that you can do is just run a flow checker. So that'll just warn you if there are any errors or warnings, connections that need to be rebuilt, any sort of errors in the flow. And then it tells me it's ready to test it. So let me enable it. So you'll see that it's not enabled. So I got to go back and actually turn on my flow. So let me save it again. Oh, it's still saving.
And while you're doing that, Heather, a question came up in the chat about adding notes in the templates to give more background. I know that I believe in the recent press release that Microsoft did, they are adding a commenting component to Power Automate, and I believe other aspects of the Power Platform like Power Apps as well. Obviously, when these were built, that feature, and I don't think that feature exists yet, but it's going to look similar to Microsoft Word when you have the review option turned on, where you can put those little comment bubbles next to each of these actions. When that's available, I think that would be a great idea as a best practice to do. Unfortunately, it's not going to impact any of the ones that have already been built, but Microsoft did say that they are releasing a commenting feature.
So you can see I am now, Trevor, it better work or I'm going to blame you. You can see I've actually ran my flow and all of these lit up green. So it should be in a good place. This means to sort of all the conditions have met and you've passed it. This will never happen to you on the first time. I'm just letting you know. You will fail and you will fail frequently, but you will absolutely learn something along the way. So again, the finished product of what we just built is, look, 2 new gifts of over $1,000 came in from Robert Hernandez and Trevor Kelly. These were the constituent IDs, and these were their hyperlinked gift amounts. And just to prove that matches exactly what is in my list. So can I get a round of applause for the live demo based on somebody else's work, and it worked the first time. So that's essentially what you're building here. It's a really good project to sort of start with. As I said, my recommendation would be to import the flow and sort of go through the steps yourself and then try to recreate it on your own, plagiarizing the parts that are tricky here. So some of the parts in the flow around the HTML tables and things like that. And if you get stuck, do refer to your documentation. Sorry, let me find it. Make sure that you refer to your documentation because you've gotten stuck in a lot of the same places. So again, some of these key concepts that we talked about very high level. So what is a dynamic versus expression, conditions, loops, how do I work with date and time? What are the different types of triggers, the different types of IDs that you have to work with, and examples, variables, data structures, all of these things. And community is your best friend. So you have a whole group of users that from Blackbaud and from other customers that are answering questions regularly in the chat in community. And if you absolutely get stuck, make sure that you sign up for some office hours time or just reach out to me at bbdevdays@blackbaud.com. So thank you all so much for your time and attention today and for your engagement and your questions. And Trevor, for being my lifeline, you made it a little bit easier for my first Skills Lab presentation. So thanks everybody for your patience because it was my first time. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the conference. See you guys soon. I think we got our developer meetups coming up in 40 minutes. So make sure if you're new to the Power Platform, Zalia's hosting a meetup, right, Zalia, for Power Platform newbies to talk about what you learned today and get you guys connected and moving forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Heather, will the chat stay open for a few minutes? I think there are a few other questions that came in.
Oh, yeah, let's go ahead there. I didn't see the question. I just saw all my accolades. Oh, the font is strange. How do we edit that? That's in the CSS. Do you want me to go back to that, Trevor?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, and I might have just done that as a joke. Where did Where does that actually live? It's in one of those probably those last ones in there that says either create HTML table, fix
Comic
instructor.
Sans? Is it
Yeah,
the Comic Sans?
it's in the CSS one. You're right.
Yeah. So you can see here the font family you chose was Comic Sans. So if you wanted, that was a joke, right?
I don't remember choosing that. I don't know if that was me. I'm not taking credit for that.
But if you wanted to change it, could you just change it to Arial?
You should be able to. Yes.
Is there anywhere else I have to change it? Let's see. Let's save.
I don't think so. And you know what? This this can be generated for you. There is a I believe there's a tool, and I might have mentioned it in one of the accelerator classes that that can generate the CSS for you. You could put in, you know, different parameters in there and have it auto generate the CSS code for you, because I know I'm not a CSS person myself.
Let's see if it changed it to Arial. Am I pressing my luck here? Oh, it changed. Let me get this open. Right? That was,
Change the heading, it looks like.
yeah, because that was that's
Oh yeah, there we go. Much better.
and that's the old one. So I think we just changed the font to Arial and it stuck. The robot listened.
See, Heather, you don't give yourself enough credit for all the magic that you can make happen here.
Are there any other questions in the chat? I'm glad we can make you laugh, Tori, with the Comic Sans. Nelly, where is the green? So again, I think all of that should be in the CSS. You see these background colors. These are the hex for the various hex codes for the various colors. Let me go back into edit. So the background color for the table is EEEEE. I'm assuming that's the green. These all that have the pound sign in front of them are all hex color, your codes for your various colors. So if you want to brand this for your organization, you would just find your brand guidelines and find those hex colors and then replace these with it. Let's see. I think that's the main one, that EEEE.
I'm putting a link to a YouTube video. I think this is what I used that kind of walks through how you can style your tables.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Trevor. Bless you. You made me a lot more confident doing this, so I really appreciate you being here. And Zalia, thank you for hosting, and everybody else. See you in the next meetup.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather.